And we're recording. Hi, everyone. It's my pleasure to introduce to you both, Dave and Debbie Evans from Real Leadership Coaching. I've known Debbie and Dave via Zoom and Skype and email for, I think, going on 7 months. And of all our community members being part of our international community, I'm especially impressed, which is why I've asked Dave and Debbie to lead our webinar today. Very, very impressed with their authenticity. They are all in. They're so passionate about sharing real, actionable, measurable, and meaningful tips how to grow organizations really of any size. So with that introduction, I'm very, very happy to turn it over to you, Debbie, to you, Dave. Thank you very, very much for making time. I know it's early evening, your time in Spain, so thank you, and please have a go at it.
Thanks, Jim. So what we prepared is an insight into our business, so a little 90-second snippet so you can see a little bit of what we do as a business. And then we're going to share 7 daily principles that will work across intergenerational businesses. So it helps everybody on cultural, from behavioural, but also some things that you can take away and transfer into your business straight away. So we're firm believers, as Jim is, about sharing content and making sure it benefits everybody. So we hope you enjoy it. We'll be clicking the screen so you can actually see the full screen without us sat here smiling at you. And please, any questions, feel free to fire them at us, and we'll happily oblige and answer. So let's just have a little 90-second clip into who we are as Real Leadership Coaching and what our business does. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of an insight, but hopefully by the end of this presentation, you'll definitely know who we are and what we do and how we can help you and your business across all the generational complexities that it arises. So I'm going to hand over to Dave, and he's going to talk you through the daily principles that he created. They're also in his book, which I'm sure he'll talk about as well. So over to you, Dave.
Thanks, Debbie. And we really are excited, as you've already heard. Today, though, not only are we going to address what Jim and Debbie have highlighted, I'm going to present to you a series of questions that are going to force you to stop and look in the mirror and really think about who you are and what is your leadership. You see, as Debbie's already highlighted, I had the privilege last year to launch this book. You can, of course, find this on Amazon, and I'm sure Jim afterwards will share how to do that across the communities. And the question I'm asking here is really, really important. Leadership theories from the 1970s still govern our industry today. And I, as an author and as a leadership coach myself, I'm saying to the world, hold on a minute, why are we teaching things so out of date when we're working with generations today that are simply so much different? Again, though, there's so much you can learn from within the book. And again, if you do get one, do let us know. Now, the book is built on a couple of really firm principles. And what we're really asking is, if you look at these 8 faces of leadership, and there are 8 sections here, I'm going to pick on one. Leadership the world over talks about things like humility, and being the servant leader, which is all true. Yet nobody says about being selfish in chapter 2. And nobody talks about a leader taking their time to really make sure you're feeding, you're building your knowledge, you're looking after yourself. And yet, actually, in this day and age, in more times than ever, it's even more important than ever before. Now, that's the first part about the book that I think you'll find super interesting. The second part is, as you look at this image, the same 8 faces of leadership. Whether you're starting out or whether you're the intergenerational leader that we're all excited about, this angle of the screen is to show it a bit more like a board game. And actually, it forces you to get into your leadership, whatever chapter it is you're actually in, making sure you stop and graze and find the things that you can teach today and teach tomorrow. Now, let's move on swiftly. The other thing about paradigms of leadership and set views and set ways of thinking, it takes one person to change it. It takes one industry to change. Now, I'm going to present to you 7 daily leadership principles that often when I coach this in webinars or conferences, I like to let people know, if you spend the rest of your professional career, whatever age you are, perfecting these 7, you can almost take them to the bank. Now, I have to clarify, of course, Debbie, you can't really take them to the bank. That would be really silly. But of course, in principle, if you just perfect these things, you're going to be amazed at how effective you will become as a leader. Now, one last thing before we even get started. One of the secrets of leadership over the years that I'm yet to find an authentic leader to stand up and say, this is what I actually do. The great leaders of our time make sure they take care of their mindset. They have a routine. They have a daily thing they do. They have a moment where they stop and decide what their mindset is. You see, the secret to a great mindset is realizing you have to set it to start with. My question to you today, whoever you are, is do you have a daily practice to set your leadership? Because if it's something you've forgotten to do, this is a critical step in leadership. Next up, though, let's take a look at one of the principles. You see, I believe that one of the tried and tested daily rules is to model the behavior you expect of others tomorrow yourself first. Here's why. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you ask somebody to do something for you? You ask somebody to buy into a program or a project or something that's really important in your business or in your firm. Now, my dog there, I do apologize about that. He was in the office, has now left the office. But you're there attempting to get somebody to buy into this. They say yes to you. And then after a few days, they haven't done that thing you asked them to engage in. You see, often people don't engage in things they don't believe you actually do. And I believe in intergenerational leadership, it is vital that all leaders take the time to go into the future and take a look at the behavior you are actually going to be expecting of your people tomorrow and bring it back to today and model it yourself first. And I don't think it matters what age you are, this is tried and tested. Now let's keep looking at these principles. You see, what we put into our focus is what enables us to create a story. I love this picture, and if you've ever used virtual reality, literally, as many of us I'm sure have, where you're able to plug it into your phone or a supercomputer, and you're able to see stuff, which is quite frankly incredible. You see, future thinking and looking at your future leadership is a vital part of this particular model. And your ability to create your future story, it sits with the leader, it sits with the firm owner, it sits with that entrepreneur. And if you haven't created a story, strategy is not enough. You see, one of the things that I like about our principles is just this.
I think a piece of advice I would give someone who's looking at expanding their capacity through a new approach would be to really begin to understand themselves first, how they show up as an individual, how they show up as a leader, and also how agile they are in their own thinking and their own way of approaching things. Do they have an agility of dealing with people differently, of learning different things, of dealing with change in a way that can help create new thinking and new ways of exploring.
You see, I love these little video snippets because they absolutely bring to life the importance of things that are almost unseen. Your ability to be agile, your ability to learn, your ability to forge a story that people can believe in. You see, one of the tried and tested again principles of modeling the right behavior and building your own leadership story is that we will all cast a shadow, whatever the weather outside, whatever the lighting in the office. People are going to see us and think, my goodness, the boss is here, or my goodness, that person in the team is here. And actually, are you somebody who adds to the situation, or are you somebody who takes away? And actually, you're going to be casting a shadow, whatever your generational age, whether you're Gen X, millennial, or baby boomer, iGen, it doesn't make any difference. It's you're going to be displaying a channel on your face. You may as well display a more useful one in the process.
Leadership is the practice of putting the lives of others sometimes ahead of our interests. Practicing leadership is like driving to work in the morning and someone wants to cut in your lane. Do you pull forward or do you pull back? That's leadership. We don't know. Maybe they're running late for a big interview and they've been unemployed for 6 months. Maybe their boss is an ogre and they left late because their kids, had trouble getting out to school today. Like, I don't know why they're late. I don't know why they're cutting it. Or maybe they're just a bastard. But we can sacrifice being at work 1 car length late. That's leadership. You're standing in the elevator. You're running late for a meeting. The doors start to close. You see someone rushing towards the elevator. What do you do? Sorry. Like, we've all done that. No, lean forward and push hold. That's leadership. You pour yourself a cup of coffee. It's the last cup. Put it back. It's empty. The next person who wants a cup, they'll make a next pot. Or when no one's looking, you make the next pot of coffee. This is leadership. And if you practice the little stuff, when you ask someone, how are you doing? You actually care about the answer, right? If you don't care, don't ask. These are little things that if you practice and practice and practice, like exercise, the pain starts to go away. You start to get a little stronger. It starts to get a little easier. You start to take those kinds of risks with bigger and bigger things. And people start to recognize that you've changed or that the environment is changing. And it's different working. It's a daily practice. Don't be intimidated by the fact that it's an awesome responsibility. Just do little things to make the lives of the people around you better. And if you practice a lot, you get good at it.
I mean, who would have thought it, and remember Debbie is here, but Debbie, who would have thought it that the idea of practicing leadership is even something that most of us even consider every day? I mean, are there any thoughts you have on it?
I think one of the things we've got to remember is about if we exhibit and we present ourselves as we want others to be. So some of the complexities across intergenerational leadership and building successful businesses with that diversity and complexity of age is that we need to understand that we learn from each other. And I think I know it's part of the rest of the principles as well. But I think it's understanding that a millennial has as much to give as somebody who's got 30, 40 years experience within business as a baby boomer. And I think we need to get better at understanding each person's own skills and then blending them together. And that's where the success comes from. But if you don't understand how you represent yourself first, then you're going to struggle. So shall we move on to principle number 2?
Yes, please. That would be fantastic. And thanks, David. You've heard me say already today on the previous note about having a story. Yet we often underestimate how powerful this is. You see, a story isn't a flash mission statement or a purpose statement that just sounds so creative and aloof. A story is more than that. A story is something that when the story is told, it lights up your mind. It lights up a person's imagination. It gives them a chance to really think about what you're actually saying to them, maybe construct images in their head or decide whether they're going to buy into it or not. And there's two types of story I'd like to ask people today to think about. Here's the first one. What's your story? I mean, we can go deeper here, Debbie. What's the story of your life so far? Do you even know? Have you looked back and thought about this? Or what is the story in your business? Do you even know what it is? Can you tell your story in 4 minutes to someone you've never met before? In fact, just one more thing. Do you even know how to introduce yourself? I met an accountant once at a conference, and I said, what is it you do? And this chap by the name of Brent Motul said to me, he said, oh, I'm a money therapist. And I said, well, what does a money therapist do? He says, I take all of the anxiety out of your money. I thought, what a great way to start a conversation. But I want to talk about vision for a moment, because vision is greater than what most people realize the word is. You see, the Bible teaches that in a proverb, that without vision, the people perish. If we don't connect the why of our organization or the reasons we do things to the everyday life of a company, if we don't connect it to a process or we don't join these things up, people are almost restricted in seeing what it is you're actually endeavoring to do. But the vision goes a step further. It means seeing. Having a vision means seeing a picture. It's not just being visionary, as is often talked about in books. It's taking a real look at what could be in the future and inspiring the people around you, and, like the picture showing you, keeping it in your focus every single day. Your story, your vision is a powerful part of intergenerational leadership.
I think there's also an element of understanding that everybody sees things differently. And I think the challenge of identifying that. So, for example, as a millennial will have a different perspective and vision and a view, but having the ability to listen and hear each other's stories for a collective view is really important. So I think it's something we've got to get better at to make these startups and businesses more successful.
Absolutely, I totally agree. Now, the other thing about vision that I quite like, and I have to say America's particularly good at this, is when you start to really stop and think, well, how big could this be? I believe you've got to think off the chart. You've got to remove barriers. You've got to stop thinking about the conditions that you're in. You've got to ask every audience that you just highlighted, Debbie, and you've got to say, do you know, what if we could just do this? What if we could literally achieve everything we've ever dreamt of? What if we had it now? What would we do? How did we get here? And really thinking big and getting past the hype. Because a real amazing story really draws people in when you get it absolutely right. Well, good point there, actually. Yeah, we should have thought about that. It's not just thinking big, of course, Jim. It's about big actions to match up your thinking. Now, moving through this next build, I want to talk to you about two very simple, quick principles that I think a leader can focus on every day. Now, Debbie just referred to removing barriers. The first step of dealing with barriers or things that are getting in the way is, do you spend time enabling your people to act? Now, act means do things. Act means take action. And what I found is, in my experience, many companies put so many processes in to almost control things for the right intentions, but they end up restricting the actual ability to do the job. Many years ago, I was working with a life insurance company, and when we did an assessment that when somebody made a claim, which meant because somebody had died, unfortunately, it took 6 weeks for the family of the deceased to process an average claim. Now, imagine how many times you had to call up for that when it's bad enough suffering the bereavement anyway. And when this particular brand realized this, they took all of the things out of the way, and they turned it into 48 hours turnaround, which is much better when grieving is an awful situation in any walk of life. The thing is here, though, ask yourself the question, as a leader, do you help your people act? Do you equip them, train them, nurture them, support them? Because leadership principle number 4 is very close behind this one. And actually, whether you're a micro or a macro thinker, it doesn't matter. Or whether you are somebody who likes to get right into the detail, number 4 is a really important principle, whatever business that you're in. It's about taking those obstacles and taking them out of the way of your people. You see, if you're creating complexity between you and your people, what's happening between you and the customers you serve, the customers who buy from you, whatever industry that you're in? I was talking to a medical company literally today, and we were talking about internal departmental fighting over who was responsible for errors. And we had people, there was a lady in this particular company who's in her 60s, has been there forever. There's a commercial director in his late 20s they see him as this young person. And there's a blend of ages in this particular business. But what was fascinating, nobody was looking at the marketplace thinking, hold on, we're suffering a little bit of shrinkage here, so our business is shrinking slightly. Shouldn't we all put down our differences and look out that window and realize we got to grab a hold of our market share? And therefore, if that's the case, how do we make our customers happier, more delighted, and remove obstacles out of the way so that our people, Debbie, can actually do the job better? And you're enabling them, like number 3, to act. This is an important principle, isn't it?
It is really important. And again, all of these are bound together by having the ability to listen. And also, listening is not hearing. They are 2 definitively different things. And unless you learn to listen and then hear, you can then make sure that you enable everybody to act. So, and that's through technology as well. I think one of the complexities of this is some people are scared of technology, don't want to use technology, and then you've got different generations as well that are having to work across these streams as well.
But I'd like to share an example there. Many years ago, in my early career, I worked with some amazing people, and when I was working with them, I worked with this one particular chap. I think he would be called your classic baby boomer today, but he had this one-touch philosophy to paper. This is in the days of overhead projectors and printing out acetates, which we thought was pretty cool technology. But I remember that that one-touch principle is the same today, but it's now digital. So the 2 worlds do align. It's just that what you can do is faster, more efficient, and literally instant. Now, the next principle I'd like to talk to you about is one of my personal favorites. And I have to say all of these are generally my favorites, but this is one of them because this goes against the grain of most companies around the world. You see, Ken Blanchard, in his 1 Minute Manager series, wrote a simple quote that said, "Catch people doing things right." You see, we all live in a world today where if you're in the classroom, however young you are, doing a spelling test and you've got 10 words you have to spell, and you get 9 out of 10 or 8 out of 10, the teacher is automatically drawn towards the 2 that you got wrong. In fact, the child focuses on the 2 that you got wrong. And misses the obvious, which is actually, you got 8 right. And there's not a human on this planet who I meet, and I tell them this analogy, and I say to them, would you have accepted 80% of an English degree or a master's in something? And everybody I meet would go, yes. The trouble is, though, we apply that same methodology to business. We focus so much on what needs to be improved. We focused on so much that's not right today. Performance, matrices, KPIs, the list is endless, processes not being adhered to. And we forget the daily success that's taking place every day. Yet, here's the interesting thing. If I said to a parent on this call, or any parent around the world, should you encourage as much good as you do with corrective behavior? They'd all say, of course you should. Yet in business, we treat it differently. And what's interesting for me, Debbie, is millennials particularly are very honest about feedback. And actually half the time, they're really engaged by just simply wanting to know how they're doing and what type of job are they doing. And what I like about millennials, they come along with a shopping list saying, I want this off you, please. And then half the leaders just don't realize that the answers were in front of them. And actually the heart, which is how people believe about themselves, it's their internal self-esteem, it's how good they are at their job, is something that goes missing in companies all over the world. And yet, may I also stop talking and say, there are companies out there who are brilliant at this too, who take this really seriously. Debbie?
I think there's also a really important element to understand that the heart of the organisation is what we would have perceived to be, and particularly the age group that we're in, because we're in the late 40s, but is that we talk about work-life balance, but when you're looking at intergenerational, they don't talk about work-life, it's life balance. We don't have a 9-to-5 job anymore, you don't have job security for life. So it's about understanding that how each person interacts within the business organisation. I think that's really important to get your head around, is that life balance is the satisfaction and the engagement and the enjoyment that you get, the relationships within the workplace and the benefits it has, and also the knock-on effect that that then has with the engagement with your customers and an awareness, which then takes you back to the other principles. You enable people to act because they become brave, they become courageous, they become honest and open and authentic, because you are giving them the ability to be open. They have a story, so they tell the story to other people. Yeah. So the heart of the organisation, and this is my favourite one, is because it's tangible and it's tactile and it's relevant. And I think it's important that we look at things differently.
Just before you change it, Debbie, there's one other comment I'd like to make. When you're leading people and you ask people to change their belief system, maybe you ask them to believe in what they're capable of, or just to believe in an initiative or something in the firm. When you encourage the heart, you encourage beliefs. And then those beliefs produce the results later on that you were hoping for in the first place. Let's look at the next one. Now, the other thing about this, of course, there are a few other small things that are flashing up right now. I want to embed something that Debbie did say, and that was this, about listening. And we want to share with you a leadership extra from RLC, that's us, and that is this: listening like your life depends on it. If you're not very good at listening, and it's something that we all from time to time have to really focus in on, we often look for the fastest shortcut to doing it better. And when you do listening like your life depends on it, which is total focus, it forces you to do so many things well as a result. Just as a quick tip. So leadership rule number 6 is another one that I think goes wrong in companies around the world. And again, this is fascinating. But I'd like you to imagine that you're working for a firm and you're interviewing somebody, and you sell the dream to another person. And maybe it's a startup, and you're getting people to join into the story, and you're going, come on board, and we're going to work so hard and do something special. And then when they come along and they join you, they realize that the story you sold them was frankly nothing like it. And of course, eventually they then leave. And this happens on all types of sizes of companies. You recruit people, you get the talent you think you need, and then they become disillusioned because you oversold what it was about. And I want to encourage you to think about, how do you recruit the right people? How do you keep them? There's a couple of classic things like taking money off the table. If you want to demotivate people around the world, play around with their pay packet. You'll soon realize what the colors of their flag really is. How do you retain them? How do you develop them? How do you make sure that you've got the right reward systems when the right people, and Jim Collins from the book Good to Great talks about having the right people on the bus. That principle is still true today because the research that went into that was so colossal. But when you get this right and you keep the right people, they'll lead the firm in the direction that you want. And don't be afraid of something that I come across quite regularly. You've got somebody in your firm who's been around forever, and then the leadership start to think about, well, we should give them a chance at this opportunity. But actually, I think talent today is timeless. If you've got the right DNA in a startup, in an existing firm, and you've got the right experience, how long you've been in the door should not matter as much anymore. It should be about, do you fit? Is it going to be the right move for the firm? And if it is, it's being brave enough to act with speed and with skill. Debbie. Now, this one is really interesting. So before I tell you about it, I quite often ask people what their personal values are when I'm doing executive coaching. And we're really lucky at RLC. We've got a whole host of brilliant coaches around the world, including our office in Los Angeles and some partners in Denver. But that said, what's interesting is you ask about what are your values, and most people have never really thought about it. And that's the challenge with principle number 7, because most people talk about having a plan, but seldom stop long enough to decide what it actually is. And when we pulled these 7 principles together, Debbie, one of the things that I remember clear as day is that no book on the planet talks about having a plan or creating a plan or writing a plan. It's expected that at the top table, whether you're a startup through to a CEO of a big firm, it makes no difference. You'll never see a CEO around the world in a boardroom somewhere going, right, who's got the plan then? It's expected as part of your day job. And I want to encourage you not just to have the plan. Now, in our business, we have a product called the RLC Success Framework. What's really clever about the Success Framework, which you can see in the notes here, is it pulls together your 7-year strategy. It creates this real clear picture of the 5 key areas of running a modern day firm. And it's a fast start process. So you can get started really, really quickly. The thing is, though, that once you've done the framework, the next step is, of course, executing the plan. And I think in this day and age, in this modern world we live in, this global platform, the more you become famous for executing the things you say or do, the more likely you are to grow your business, to grow your firm, and to be a business that's noticed in your marketplace. My question today is simple. Do you have a plan, and are you executing it? As a leader, are you someone who does exactly what you say?
So I think one of the things that we've discovered as well, working with some intergenerational businesses ourselves, is that there is a lot of talk and then there's a lot of doing, and each different generation has a different understanding. And this is why these principles are really applicable. So having a clarity of the story allows people to understand that the story becomes the plan and you build it. So Dave touched on that success framework, and our success framework is one that's universal. We use it for businesses that have got a startup business, a transitioning business, somebody, an exit strategy and they want to sell the business, culture and behaviour if they want to extend their team or they're growing their team, or the opposite, if they're reducing their team. Yeah. So the applicableness, I think I've just made a new word up today, how applicable it is and the impact it has on everybody is everybody has a voice. And I think one of the things that we're learning is that we stifle people's voices. He who shouts loudest, he who has the ability to feel their presence. And one of the things that we teach and educate and coach throughout all of our work is the ability to manage self and manage ego. And one of the things we have found that there are different, ego is present in every generation. Yeah. And managing that means that if you apply these 7 leadership principles within your business, whether it's a startup right through to an existing business, is that you will start to have everybody's voice heard. It allows your business to grow in the way that you want to grow it, whether that be fast, slow, medium, or just on a day by day. But anything is always based on what are the daily actions and am I delivering these as a leader within my business? And the hierarchy of leadership is also really interesting in intergenerational businesses, because what happens is age is not relevant to the leader's role. And I think those are the things that can be very challenging. Some of the complexities that we deal with is that you may have somebody from a baby boomer who has got many, many strengths and great qualities to add to the existing business, but hasn't got the leadership skills. Whereas you may have somebody who's younger who has got some really great leadership skills through just maybe their education process they've been through, maybe their own environment and social. So we look at our own children and their ability to actually translate and socially educate others means that we have got to move away from these paradigms of society that say, you're a certain age, you have to deliver this, you have to do this, you have to do that before you can do anything else. And I think those are the exciting things, that when we deliver the principles to most of the businesses, again, we're giving it as a gift aid to everybody, it really translates to everything that you'll do in your daily business to drive it and bring the whole ability of every generation together, whether it's 4 generations or whether it's 10 generations. We have the ability to ensure that if you are really focused and understand the key principles to apply, you will be successful.
And I'd like to just check in what we've got left in this presentation here, Debbie. Here's the 7, and have a look at those for a moment. But there's a family that we'll hopefully in the future, Jim, introduce you to, who has the father, the brothers, and younger children involved in their company. In America, a real live example of all of those key intergenerational groups. Yeah, what I really was proud to deal with last year was doing a success framework with this family where everybody involved was willing to stick it all in the pot, the melting pot. And if they couldn't come to an agreement on how they were going to run their businesses, it literally would have created a family implosion, which I thought was a real fascinating thing and a real privileged thing to be part of. Now, I'm only telling you about this naturally because the family led themselves through some really choppy waters and sorted it all out. Credit to them. But I'd like you to think about one last thing, really, before we open up the call for questions or anything, Jim, you'd like to ask us on behalf of the participants, etc. Are you working on your leadership? Do you know what it is? You see, one of the things I ask in workshops is a very simple question. How do you do leadership? And people come up with all kinds of answers, and the answer is actually really easy. It's coaching, leadership coaching. Leadership is you. Leadership is how you set your stall out as a leader, whatever type of business you're in. And the coaching is what you choose to do with your leadership to upskill and build the people around you. And that means you got to go and sharpen your skills. It means you got to go and learn, read, educate, be part of something, connect, network. The list is endless. But it's a vital part of developing your leadership tool set and toolkit to be great in business both today and in the future. Debbie.
So for us, we've been delighted to be able to have the opportunity to virtually meet Jim, and I'm sure we're going to meet him very soon in the flesh, hopefully, that'll be really great, but also to be able to support the 4Gen initiative. And we would happily take any questions or any support or any information that anybody else wants. Jim, I will send you the presentation so you can also share that out as well. So it's over to you. We've fired a lot at you in a very short period of time. So we're happy to continue sharing and supporting the 4Gen initiative.
Fantastic. Thank you, Debbie. Thanks, Dave, so much for you being all in, all inclusive, and very comprehensive. Dave, you mentioned that the family in the U.S. with the multiple generations. So a question that I had texted in from one of our members in St. Louis, Tom, a millennial, asks, which of the of the 4 generations, is there one of the 7 principles that is most effective, or is there a principle that maybe one of the 4 generations, say boomers, they are least likely to engage? And if so, maybe you can comment why. But just, I think the question is, based on your experience from an intergenerational coaching perspective, do some generations gravitate more towards relying on 1 or 2 of the 7? If you could comment on that. I think that's what Tom was asking.
Absolutely, it's a great question. So in my experience, that if we look through the different generations, there's a couple of call-outs. So millennials are very well equipped for self-leadership and self-choices like we've never seen before. And therefore, they will make their own decisions based on all kinds of data and information. So when you take the first principle, which is modeling the behavior you expect of others tomorrow yourself first, millennials are very good at that because they want to find out now. And they'll do shortcuts like I've never seen either. They'll watch videos and all kinds of stuff way ahead of the curve. Whereas if you look at a baby boomer as a contrast, there's many baby boomers who've been very successful, rightly so. And they have expectations, so they forget to do number 5. So they struggle with number 5, encouraging the heart, even though, right, Jim, they know they should. Right. So there's not an intelligence or an awareness issue. They just, it's what they did. They get lost in their own story, number 2. So, I had to do this and I had to do that. And therefore that becomes a filter that skews how they see the picture for what it is today. So, but to answer directly, I think millennials particularly are very good at number 1 and self-leading themselves. I think boomers sometimes struggle with number 5, but they are very good at number 2, their story, because they've got the experience. And actually where I think boomers could be really useful is around taking more of a mentoring approach and almost sharing some of the stuff. Because I don't know about you, Jim, but I've made a whole range of screw ups in my time, right? And actually,
we don't have enough time to share all mine, but I hear you, Dave.
well, we might need a couple of weeks for mine, but it's the reality that, you know, in education today they don't talk about failure enough, and therefore kids don't know how to fail. It's not their fault. But actually, Socrates has been teaching for thousands of years, even though he's not here now, that, you know, the speed of your recovery is also the speed of your success. You know, that is so important in business that getting it wrong is sometimes the only way to carve out the answer.
Dave, I love that. I love that. And I got to jump in and just ask you, so from an intergenerational perspective, for organizations, if I hear you correctly, the more successful the organization, would you agree that the more they encourage, quote, learning or risk-taking and by definition, failure? And if that is true, does it really matter based on your clientele, which generation is a certain of the 4 generations that we're talking about encourage that learning by failure to increase value add to the customers more than another? Just your comments.
So I think this is a really interesting debate, and it could go on for a long time, so I'll paraphrase it.
Yeah.
Millennials particularly have a higher expectation in what they expect, i.e. so whether that's as a consumer, a client, etc. So they also replicate that in the way that they have expectations as a leader, as somebody who's an employee. So that's really interesting, because then the knock-on effect is that the challenges that you get is that I think the iGen and the Generation X, we're still learning a lot about those generations, and I think labeling is quite challenging. But I actually think they're kind of hybrid, because they're learning at a different speed than everybody else, whereas our millennials they've got different challenges from a fiscal perspective. And I think one of the things about a baby boomer is they can also restrict themselves because they can have a biased view. And I think those are the bits we've got to educate everybody on. So I think there's ability for everybody to do it and learn to fail. But I actually think the strength of skill comes where the millennials are, because there's less self, even though the people call them snowflakes and all this, which I just don't agree with at all. I think there's a strength of self, and self-belief means that you can fail. And if you go back to our principle of enable people to act, that means you empower them. So if I'm empowered, I'm less restricted. So I will make mistakes and happily make mistakes, because what I do is I get straight back up and I go and do something else. And I think that's the difference. Baby boomers are more challenged because we're told not to fail. You couldn't fail. It was bad for business. It was bad PR. It was bad for the brand. Well, actually, there's so many historical examples now in the past, 5 years of businesses that have really screwed up. I mean, big time, proper customer facing. And when you actually go back and see how they've restored it, is through this younger generation of communications, whether it's social media or interacting directly with the client. So I think we've got to get better at accepting failure ourselves. But I think we also got to praise that younger generation, because they're happy to do it. And I like that too.
And Jim, just to add to Debbie's comment, 2 weeks ago, I was in London with a think tank. Debbie will tell you the name of the organisation.
The Royal Institute. Can't believe you don't remember it. The Royal Institute of Foreign Affairs. So they work with the diplomats across the whole of the world, and we're doing a leadership program with them. So these are all the up-and-coming diplomats. And
what was really fascinating, Jim, is that there was a real diversity of ages in the room. And not only that was it of ages, it was from where they're from on the planet, ranging from Russia to Japan to Armenia to Azerbaijan to Syria, right? There was a chap in the room whose family is still in Syria. And so it's a real sensitive stuff. But what I found was fascinating is that it didn't matter, actually, who they were, how old they were, that decisions to connect with people, decisions to be in the moment, decisions to set the example yourself and really find out to understand. They just work. And actually that removes so many barriers. If we just start to decide at the beginning of a conversation, do I value this other person? Yes, hopefully, right? And therefore, if I value them, should I do the very best I can in this situation? Again, the answer actually is yes. And we saw a group of them, and they were all advising during the day I was there on what Trump was about to do. So, so it was super sensitive. Yet they said the following sentence: "We didn't think academically you could actually teach us anything about leadership." And when they left, they said, "We realized there's loads we still need to learn." And that's the same for all of us, I think. That it's just a choice. Do I want to define it? Do I want to be known for what I tell people I am? And can I get better at it? And if you can say yes to those, any one of the generations that we've highlighted today on the call together, if you can answer yes to that, you can always find a way to be better at leadership.
Awesome. Dave, Debbie, out of respect for your time and our members, I'm so glad that we chose you